Well, more reaction now to what's been happening in Brussels. Let's get Nigel Farage's view, member of the European Parliament, of course, and head of UK Independence Party. And we assume you're rubbing your hands with glee, Mr Farage.
Well, it's certainly a very fundamentally important night for Britain's relationship with the European Union. But the temptation is to say, look, well done, Cameron, let's all cheer. But let's realise this. He gained absolutely nothing last night. He tried to put some protection in place for our financial markets. President Sarkozy told him to take a running jump, and what that means is all the talk over the last few weeks about repatriating powers aren't worth a light. An a la carte menu will not be offered to us in future. And I also feel that there's going to be a degree of retribution for this. You know, Sarkozy made it pretty clear he was deeply unhappy with the Brits. Every time the euro tosses from now on, it is the City of London that will get the blame, and I fear that we're now going to get a torrent of financial market legislation imposed upon us, where we find ourselves now in a permanent voting minority. So I'm not cheered about that, but what does cheer me up in many ways is, I think, whether he knows it or not, Mr Cameron's actions last night have sparked the beginning of the end of Britain's relationship with the European Union. The more we discuss this, the more we realise being stuck in this outside room, still a member of the Union, subject to all of its laws, but having no influence, is the wrong place to be.
So what of that argument that, you know, it's very difficult for us to disentangle ourselves from the European Union? Should we actually still be in that room, having an influence, a sway, particularly on these decisions on the financial markets in the city? Because many people are pointing out now what David Cameron has done is to remove that influence.
I don't believe we had much influence before last night. I now believe we have zero influence. We will find ourselves in a permanent minority in voting terms in the Council of Ministers. We know there is great antipathy towards what they deem to be our Anglo-Saxon practices, our financial markets, something that is 10% of our economy, our biggest industry, our biggest export. We are now very vulnerable, and I believe there'll be a very heavy price to pay. So I want us to leave the European Union and to renegotiate a genuine free trade agreement. If countries like Norway and Switzerland can have the same terms of trade with Europe without being members of this union, that's exactly where we should be.
What about the argument then that all this basically is a political wrangle, a political decision, and it's fiddling away while the euro burns? And really, we ought to be addressing the issue of the single currency, even though we're not in it, because so much of our trade is done with that euro group.
Listen, the argument that is being put here by 17 countries, and sadly supported by David Cameron and George Osborne, is that everything must be done to save the euro. It can't be saved. It's broken. Countries like Greece and Portugal should never have joined in the first place. The right thing to do with the euro is to let those countries leave, to help them get their currencies back, to try and stop massive capital flight from their economies. What we are doing here is reinforcing failure, and frankly, the Eurozone will be pouring good money after bad. This thing will break. Nothing that happened last night is going to help the euro in any way at all.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much indeed for joining us there in Brussels.
Thank you.